This is the end of this piece of Talmud. So we're just going to finish this Talmud, and we'll probably start the Mishnah as well today. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Baruch Shalchanu Mishalo. So what Rabbi Yochanan is asking here is, what do you say? So we've been talking about this idea of the quorum. Remember, it's a biblical commandment. The biblical commandment is v'achalta v'savata v'rachta. If you eat and you're satiated, you must bless. So a group of people have eaten, they are satiated. Think about how we are satiated today compared to how they're satiated. In the past, we are so blessed that even someone that's not of means is considered wealthy in previous times today. We live in a wonderful, wonderful period of the world, whereas food security is very different than it was perhaps even 100 years ago. And so there's great blessings in the fact that we're satiated. Other faiths will bless when the food is in front of them. Well, it's easy to bless when you see the bounty in front of you. It's difficult to remember to bless after you're full. The Jewish way is to bless after you're full. How do you make this blessing? What's the process? When do you start? Do you say the tea has been served? Let's bless. What do you do? And so we know now. It says one person will say, gentlemen, let us make a blessing. Rabotai nivarech. Gentlemen, let us make a blessing. Now Rabbi Yochanan says, that's very nice. But what do you answer to that? So he says, the answer, the formula is Baruch Shalchanu Mishalo. Blessed is the one for whose food we have eaten. Hadezet Talmud Chacham. This person, if he says that, Baruch Shalchanu Mishalo, we consider him a Torah scholar. Al Hamozoin Shalchanu Hadezet Bur. But if he says, for the food we've eaten, he's an ignoramus. A very, very different, very tiny little Baruch Shalchanu Mishalo versus Ala Mazon Shalchanu. Very similar statements. One we consider a scholar, the other one we consider ignoramus. Why? Because of the way that person made the blessing. One referred to the food coming from God, and the other one just said, oh, for the food we have eaten. Thank you, universe. Amar Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, braided Rav Yeshua, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, law amaran elo bishleisha. This is, we're only talking about with regards to 3 people, which means if 3 people ate, then we're talking about this particular situation. Deleka shem shemayim, where there's no mention of God when 3 people are eating together. Avo basara, but what if there's 10 people who ate together? Remember, we know already 10 is a unique number in Judaism because 10 constitutes a minyan. Why does it constitute a minyan? Because it says that when 10 gather, Shechina Shuri B'neihem, the God's presence rests amongst them when 10 are together. So because when 10, God's presence, there, what does the Talmud say? There we mention God's name. Ika Shem Shemayim, but it's obvious. We knew that. Mocha Milsa. We learned this in our Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? The idea of blessing. What do you say? Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael Elokei Hatzvaka Yisrael Akruvim Ala Mazon Shalchanu. Blessed be the Lord our God, the God of Israel, the God of hosts who sits upon the cherubs for whose food we have eaten. So we know now. The Mishnah already said that. So what's unique here? What are we trying to say? The difference between the nuance of 3 verse 10, mentioning God's name or not mentioning God's name. The Mishnah already said that when you are satiated and you bless with God's name. Now we're going to continue and ask the question. Echad asara. We know about 10. What if there's 11? Echad asara riboy. What if there's more than 11? Myriads, 100,000. Ha gufa kasha. With regards to the Mishnah has it's difficult to understand the Mishnah. Amart echad basara, the echad asara riboy. On one hand, this formula that you created is good for 10 and good for 100,000. Alma kiha didininu. But then it's taught on the other hand, what do we say? A group of 100 people, you say one thing. The group of 1,000 people, you say another thing. A group of 10,000 people, you say another thing. So evidently, the formula of what you say will depend on the number of people. Just to understand the practical law, it does not matter. Between 10 and 100,000, practically, we don't make any differentiation. The only differentiation, interestingly enough, that we do actually make is between 10 and 600,000. Now, you're thinking to yourself, is it even possible that could happen? I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's ever really happened. But that is a differentiation that we make between 10 and 600,000. When we have 600,000 people that gather, there's a special blessing that we make. And it's the blessing called HaChacham Razin, the wise one who sees secrets. And the reason why we make this blessing is because we say that if 600,000 people have gathered and there's no civil war, then it must mean that there's a wise one who sees secrets, because that's a miracle. So it's an interesting nuance within Judaism. We say a blessing with 600,000 people gather because it's amazing idea that 600 can gather together, 600,000 can gather together, and there's no civil war. Everyone good so far?
Have you any idea how they arrived at that number?
Yes, 600,000 souls at Sinai.
I think there's also an idea, it's kind of like, in a way, we're kind of God's brain cells, so to speak.
Yeah, I can see that.
We all connect to each other like the parts of the brain, and they have to be in unison. Yeah,
what's interesting also, I mean, this is not related, but you're thinking about the brain. There's actually there are 248 limbs in the body and 365 veins in the body, and together that corresponds to 248 positive commandments and 365 negative commandments. Together, 613 commandments. It's interesting that the actual physical elements of the body are intricately correlated with the way, with the mitzvot, the 613 mitzvot, and the way that we fulfill our purpose in this world. Just an interesting factoid with regards to that.
And that's another 600, except times it by 1,000.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a connection.
Rabbi, I have and I'm sure I'm wrong. What was the number written in the Torah for the amount of men that left Egypt? Not total fighting men.
603,000. Yeah. 603,850. I'll tell you also very interesting.
But it was 600. Okay.
Yeah. You're right. You're on par. What's also interesting is Yisrael, which represents Israel, the children of Israel, the state of Israel. Yisrael is a mnemonic for Yesh Shishim Riboy Otiot La Torah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Now, the truth is that there really aren't, because today with computers, we've counted all the letters. In the 5 books of Moses, there are 305,806 letters. We actually know this number as a fact. And so how they came to this idea of Yisrael means 600,000 letters, I'm going to say it's because of the 600,000 souls at Sinai. That each one of us, because according to our tradition, 600,000 souls were all master souls. It says in the Midrash that each one of us were at Sinai. How is it possible? I wasn't at Sinai. I've never been to Egypt or the Sinai Desert, for that matter. It's not a great place to go nowadays. It's a little bit of a dangerous neighborhood. So how is it possible that I was at Sinai? Because each one of us come from master souls, and those master souls are the 600,000 souls that were at Sinai. So we all have a place in the Torah. Each of us have a letter in the Torah. Actually, it's a mitzvah. The 613th commandment is to write a Torah. If you can't afford to write a Torah, you can buy a letter in a Torah. which a lot of people do during their lifetime. And the reason why we buy one letter, it's because a Torah is not complete unless every single letter is there and every single letter is written and not erased and not cut and not so if you have a letter and that letter is in that Torah, it's like you wrote the whole Torah, because the whole Torah is not complete without your letter, as the whole Jewish people are not complete without your soul. So that is a way that we're able to fulfill that 613th mitzvah in the Torah, by buying a letter in the Torah.
I heard you could write books about the Torah.
Yeah.
Is the number that's chosen here, as they look at all of these, is there anything significant? Or are they just making examples of these numbers?
Right now, the rabbis are just making examples. They're saying, is there a differentiation?
I got it.
Between 3? We know there's a differentiation between 3 and 10. That we know for sure. Is there a differentiation between 10 and 100,000? I think what the Talmud will generally do is it's going to push the envelope. It's gonna, in order to find the law, to find the nuance of the law, it's gotta push the envelope. So this is the rabbis pushing the envelope, trying to say, is there a difference? And the simple answer is no, there is no difference. The more complicated answer is that there is nuance, and so let's continue this. Good, we're all good here. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, "Lo kasha." This whole problem that you're having is no question. No question. Rav Yosef Haglili. Why? Because this is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Akiva is a different story. The Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, the Firoiv HaKahol, according to the size of the crowd, Hein Mevarachim, that's how we bless. Shenemar, how do we know this? It says in the verse in Tehillim, in Psalms, the Makhelos Baruch Hu Likim, blessed you, God, in full assemblies. What is the definition of full assemblies? That is, we see a source from King David in Psalms about full assemblies. Now we can ask the question, what is a full assembly? Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, no, absolutely no. There's no distinction based on crowd. What do we find in the synagogue? Both when there are many and when there are few, as long as there are 10, we use God's name, the ends. Rabbi Akiva, did Rabbi Yossi Haglili, my avidle. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Akiva, what does he do with the fact that Rabbi Yossi Haglili said there is a difference? And he quoted the verse from the Psalms. It's very nice for you to say there's no difference, but Rabbi Yossi Haglili actually has a source for it. What are you going to do, Rabbi Akiva, with that source? So the Gemara answers, Mi boyalei. We have to derive from this, from the Brisa, the Katanya that we learned in the Brisa. The Haya Rabbi Meir says Rabbi Meir, Minayin shafilu uborin shebimei eman va'amru shira al hayam. Even the fetuses in the mother's womb recited the song when they crossed the Sea of Reeds, leaving Egypt. How do we know that? Shenemar, because it says, Makheles Baruch Hu Likim Hashem Mimkar Yisrael. What does it say? In assemblies, bless God, the Lord, the source of Israel. The fetuses are included in these assemblies. V'idach. And the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Mimkar Nafka. That what does he say? He derives from this the source of Israel. What is it talking about? It's not talking about the differentiation of blessing, but rather that each one of us are part of this, even the fetuses, even the souls that aren't born yet. We are all part of the assembly. We are all part of Klal Yisrael. We are all part of the assembly of Israel. Each one of us has a unique place, as I just explained before.
So this then ties into why we were all at Sinai.
That's right. This exact ties in. Exactly. That's why I brought that up before, so you can see the connection and how it all kind of ties together, and the Talmud is tying together. Amar Rava says, Rava, halacha ka Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva wins. The halacha, the law is according to Rabbi Akiva, he wins. Ravina Rav Chama bar Buzi. Ravina Rav Chama bar Buzi says an interesting story happens. They were at the banquet at the house of the Reish Galusa. Come Rav Chama, the Kama Hadar Abayima. What happens? Rav Chama rose, and he was starting to gather a group of 100 people for a quorum, for a zimun, to say the grace after meals. Amar le Ravina. Says Ravina, you don't need this. Why are you trying to gather 100 people? Because Rabbi Akiva, is the one we go by. The law is according to him. There's no difference between 10 and myriads. Why are you trying to get 100 together? Just get 10 together. Don't make yourself crazy. Amar Rava. What happens? When we eat bread in the house of the Reish Galusa, we recite blessings in groups of 3. Let them recite blessings in groups of 10. What's going to happen? The Reish Galusa, the great leader of the Jewish people, who's called the Reish Galusa, he's going to become angry. Why? He's going to see large groups of sages reciting the grace after meals before he completed the meal. So the Gemara says, why could they not satisfy their obligation with the Reish Galusa's blessing? Everyone's making noise. There's too many people here. When you get a bunch of Jews together, they're all going to be talking. This is the reality. They're talking about the reality. If you're at a party, you can never get the Jews to shut up. This is the reality. So if they can't shut up, you got to have no choice. You just take the 3 people next to you and you say, okay, let's make it happen. You can't wait for the Reish Galusa because no one's going to be quiet long enough to make that happen. And I think anyone who's ever been at a party with a bunch of Jews, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Exactly what I'm talking about.
What year was this written in?
1900 years ago. And how, my friends, how nothing has changed.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed. Unbelievable, huh? Amar Rabba Tosfa, says Rabba Tosfa. These 3 people who break bread together, the Kadem Chad Minayu Varechidayte. One of them went ahead and recited on his own without a zimun. Ino nafkin bezimun didei. What happens? The other 2 fulfill their obligation with the other person making the zimun. Ihu la nafek. The zimun didhu the fisha ain zimun lefare. He does not fulfill the obligation as the participation in their zimun because there's no retroactive zimun. Once he recited his blessing, he participates in the zimun to accomplish nothing. So which means you can only participate in the quorum, in the zimun, if you are ready to make the blessing or you haven't made the blessing yet. If you already made the grace after meals, you can't be part of the 3. I'll give you an example. You're sitting at a Shabbat meal and somebody says, I got to go. And they start reciting the grace after meals. You're like, but there's 3 of us. We want to make a zimun. Nope, sorry, you're done. That person is done. Finished. You cannot make the zimun anymore. So that's why if you're the first person to stand up to leave, you say, I have to go. You'll say to the host, or the host will say, let's all do it together. That way we can do the zimun. He's just giving a nuance, a very important nuance. Rabbi Yishmael says Rabbi Yishmael, Rafram bar Papi Klo levei kinishta da avi gibor. Rabbi Yishmael said, the Lord, blessed be one, Rafram bar Papa, happened to come to the synagogue of Abe Giver. Come, Krab Sifra Ba'am. And he rose to read from the Torah. What did he say? Baruch Hu es Hashem. He said, blessed is the Lord. So, when you get an aliyah, you say, Baruch Hu es Hashem Amvarach. So he says, Baruch Hu es Hashem Amvarach. The ishtik. And he was silent. He didn't answer. the Blessed One. Why? Because Rafram Bar Papa followed the principle that the law is accordance with Rabbi Akiva, and the people who were there didn't know what to do because they didn't know the ruling. And what does everyone say? Akuma bahadi pluga lamalach v'hu noig omok Rabbi Yishmo. Everyone said Baruch Hashem Avorach. Everyone responded. And Rav Bar Papa says, "You black pot." Black pot is a nickname for a Torah scholar who invests great effort in Torah study and in prayer. You black pot, why are you involving yourself? You're making machloket. You're making disputes for no reason. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael disagree. We know that from before. Rabbi Yishmael's formula, in which Rabbi Akiva is included, is acceptable to both. So he says, why are you making problems here? And then, in that case, the accordance is with Rabbi Yishmael. And that's the end of this piece of Talmud. What we'll do today is we'll cover the Mishnah. We want to make sure. I think we'll cover the Mishnah. Yeah, let's cover the Mishnah, and then we'll call it a day.
Just ask one thing. What's the actual definition of zimun?
Zimun is quorum. Okay, this is the Mishnah, and we're going to cover the Mishnah, and then we'll continue the Talmud. The Mishnah, we'll do the Mishnah again next week and the Talmud, but I want to just get you started on the next Mishnah. Shlosha sha'ochu ka'achat. 3 people who ate as one. Einon Russian, they chalek. They cannot divide and recite the grace after meals individually. They have to do it together. The chen arba, the same with 4. The chen chamisha, the same with 5. Shisha nechlokin, but a group of 6 up to Adasara, up to 10, Va'asara ein nechlakin. But with regards to 10, you cannot divide into 2 groups. So if you have 3, they have to eat together. If you have 4, the same. If you have 5, the same. But if you have 6, they can have 2 groups of 3 until you reach 10. When you reach 10, they have to do it together. Until there are 20 people present. Adasrain, until there are 20 people present. Why? Because if you have 20, you have 2 10s now. Simple math. So the general principle is that a group may not divide unless the smaller groups are going to be able to do the same zimun formula with a group. So you don't want to leave other people out. So if you have 3, if you have 5, it has to be together. If you have 6, you can make 2 groups. If you have 10, you make 1 group. If you have 20, you make 2 groups. Or you do it together. Now the Mishnah says an interesting halacha. 2 groups that joined together. They were eating in one house. This man shemiksasan royin elu es elu. They combined to form a zimun. Hadei elu masar from the zimun. Im lav, if not, elu mizamnim asman v'loi v'elu mizaman asman. They recite the zimun for themselves, and everyone does it for themselves. 2 groups are eating together in one house. Either they come together and do it, or they can do it for themselves. Ein mivarchin, but also interesting is a blessing over wine. One does not make a blessing ala yayin over wine until they add water to it. This is what Rabbi Eliezer says. Why? Undiluted wine is too strong to drink, and the blessing is inappropriate because people don't drink it. This is not necessarily true today because we have wine that is beautiful wine that can be had, and there was a certain time period where they were all mavushal, and mavushal doesn't mean what it means today. Mavushal, literally, they would boil it to the pulp. So it literally was alcohol, it was undrinkable. And so the only way to drink it was to add water. So he's saying it's inappropriate to make a blessing over something that's disgusting. They were drinking wine because they were afraid that the idolaters were using it for ritual purposes. So they would boil it to the point where an idolater wouldn't be interested in it. But it wasn't drinkable. It literally wasn't drinkable. So because it wasn't drinkable, you can't honor God with something that's not drinkable. So they would have to add water. But what the rabbis say, that it's possible to drink undiluted wine and make a blessing over it. Why? Because you're still honoring Hashem with it. And the Gemara is going to talk about it in great detail. But it's a very interesting element, and I think historically it was something that was very, very important for the Jewish people, this idea of wine, because most of the time the wines were made by people who were religious, and they were using it for different religious practices. And the Jewish people, though wine is made from grapes, it should be kosher in any situation. The Jewish people were always worried about defaning the second commandment of the 10 commandments and serving other gods, and the wine being elevated and made holy by people who were idolaters would be against the Torah. And so that's how there became a differentiation between kosher and non-kosher wine.
Did the usage of wine in religious context, was it something that the Jewish people got from another religion, or did they kind of incorporate wine into religion themselves?
It's a very, very good question. It's a very good question. It seems to be, from an historical perspective, that it did come. The reason why the Jews used wine is because they wanted to find the most expensive beverage that they could honor God with. And wine was the most expensive beverage. So it was a way to, you could just bring in the Shabbat and say, Yom HaShishi Vayechul Hashemayim, and bring in the Shabbat. And that is bringing in Shabbat. But they wanted to show God how beautiful the Shabbat is. And so they're going to use the most expensive thing they had, and that was wine. At the time, that was what it was.
So we're always trying to enhance by adding things that we thought were expensive or things that were beautiful to enhance the Shabbat experience. Man added to the commandment, kind of like built around it.
Exactly. And that's our Talmud for today.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. It's so good to be together, and we will do this again soon. Next week.
Thank you. See you tonight.
See you tonight, and see you all next week.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.
Bye.
About the wine now, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Yes, Julianne, please, about the wine.
Thank you. So what I'm thinking is, other gods, they don't exist, or they're forces that God uses. In other words, forces that serve God.
Yes.
So if someone blesses these other gods, surely that has no meaning. They're literally blessing either nothing, or the blessing will in turn go up to God, because it's like people that pray to angels. They're not supposed to do that, but the angels are just intermediaries. So it will either be nothing or it will raise to God. So why is it bad to have this wine? Because there's no inherent power in this, though it was done wrongly, to sort of say this wine you must keep away from.
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
And you.
Bye.
Bye.